Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Bull Breakdowns here on the Guilty as Charged podcast YouTube channel. Here to talk to you about a Chargers victory over the Broncos, their first win in Denver since 2018 under new head coach Jim Harbaugh. If you want a reference point for how long it's been since the last Chargers win in Denver, Geno Smith was the Chargers backup to Phillip Rivers the last time they won in Denver on December 30th, 2018. He has since been the backup on other teams. He's had his Seattle resurgence, gotten big contracts, all in a 6-year span. So things certainly look different for Geno and the Chargers 6 years ago. But great to get this win. It was a long time coming in the making, and they made it complicated in how they got there. And we'll talk about some of the complications. But it is a win nonetheless, and brings them to 2-1 in the AFC West and 3-2 on the season. So they, keep level in this little. Too early to talk about the playoff picture and stuff like that. A big win to potentially have a tiebreaker with Denver by the end of the year, if that was to be necessary. So first, I do want to talk about Jim Harbaugh's cardiac incident, which I, tweeted out a lot of the stuff that was happening during the press conference. And then I wrote up an article on it on Bolt Beat, the timeline of events and how things happened. But Harbaugh leaves the game in the first quarter. He is replaced by acting head coach Jesse Minter. It was, not cool given the circumstances, but interesting to see that, he got the challenge flag and then sort of the nod from Harbaugh in that scenario, which, could be important going forward. Obviously, it wouldn't really be Roman because Roman coaches in the booth. But, he had the challenge flag for a while, and he was running the team until Harbaugh came back out of the tunnel and then took head coaching responsibilities back. We were informed in the third quarter by the CBS broadcast team that Harbaugh was suffering from arrhythmia, which is essentially an irregular heartbeat. He felt this last night, and he also felt this today. And, this is something that has happened to him before in the year 1999 and as well as 2012. He said in his post-game press conference, he ended up having cardiac ablation done both times, which is a minimally invasive procedure in which electrical signals are sent to the heart to kill some of that tissue that is causing, this irregular arrhythmia, speeding up of the heart rate, ultimately in Harbaugh's case. So it's unknown if he'll need a procedure like that again. Again, it's not something you need to miss time for. It's a very minimally invasive procedure nowadays, but he'll meet with his cardiologist tomorrow. So today, when this video goes up, and discuss, the next steps and probably take, heart measurements and monitor everything going forward and, discuss some kind of treatment plan. Obviously, Harbaugh gets the banger quote at the end of the game where he said he's 2-0 with arrhythmias, referring to the 2012 Monday Night Football game against, I don't actually remember who the Niners were playing, but I know that might have been Kaepernick's. I don't remember if that was Kaepernick's debut or something like that. But anyway, he had they won that game on Monday Night Football with the Niners. They end up winning this game. So he said in the press conference he's 2-0 with arrhythmias. And I did think it was funny. We've had this back and forth between Harbaugh and Popper and Chris Rim of hey, so Joey didn't practice today. What's up with him? Is he hurt? And then, Harbaugh will say he's not medically qualified to give any of that information out and do his usual injury spiel. But he did kind of jokingly reference that and saying that he was medically qualified to talk about his own, cardiac issue that happened in this case. So I thought that was a little funny jab, I guess, at the media. But nonetheless, great to hear that Harbaugh is okay. Doesn't seem like this is something that will cause him a lot of, strife going forward. But obviously, best wishes, to him as he, tries to chart out a little recovery from this. It's not something that will cause a lot of downtime, like I said. But something worth monitoring, I guess, going forward. Now that he's medically qualified to tell us about these updates, maybe he'll be a little more open about it at the press conference. We'll see. But yeah, all in all, a little bit of a scary incident. I think they said that, yeah, there's a clip of John Harbaugh being his brother, Ravens head coach, being whisked away from the press conference to, figure out exactly what happened with Jim. Justin Herbert and some of the Chargers were unaware of what happened in game until afterwards, although Herbert said he was told about Harbaugh's arrhythmia last night because he said, he felt some of the same symptoms both Saturday night and in pregame warmups before the Sunday game. So something that they kind of had an idea of, but didn't totally understand why he left the field at the time. But nonetheless, he was given, I think he mentioned a magnesium sulfate treatment by the team's head doctor, Marco Zucconi, and then he was able to come back out to the game. So nonetheless, something to talk about. Best wishes to Coach Harbaugh, as always. And great that he was able to get this win and head to 2-0 with arrhythmias, as he said. Let's talk about the game now that we've gotten past that. The Chargers always find new ways to have an injury or something that can happen during a game that you didn't even really know was possible to happen during a game. So they really test the limits on that kind of stuff. But getting to the game, Chargers win 23-16. The moment that everybody wants me to talk about first, Kimani Vidal, wheel route, 38-yard touchdown on his first NFL touch. When I tell you I leapt off my couch, that's underselling it. I screamed, I yelled. It was so great, man. To see that for Vidal, who was inactive for the first 4 games. They obviously had Edwards healthy, they had Dobbins healthy, and they liked Haskins as kind of the special teams guy. But for Vidal to get that moment today was great. I think it showed a dimension of what he's capable of doing in this offense that other running backs aren't really capable of doing, right? Gus, it was sort of brought in to be the short yardage back, right? He's not here to, run wheel routes and do all this stuff. I don't even think J.K. Dobbins really is that elite, of a receiver himself, right? He's best when he's kind of running and breaking off some explosive runs. So I think they have Vidal now who can kind of provide a nice contrast to the style, sort of in the vein of, I guess what we saw with Eckler and Melvin Gordon, right? Or, not saying they're this good, but Sproles and LT, right? The same similar type of vibe that Vidal, I think, can certainly provide in the receiving game. He got another target. I don't know how many targets he ended up having. Let me just look real quickly. I think it was just those 2 targets, if I'm correct. He had those 2 targets. He had another catch for about 2 or 3 yards after the touchdown. But it felt like, they were pretty comfortable going to him in those scenarios. And, for him to have that implicit trust of the team and ultimately have it designed to look for himself in his first NFL game, just very cool stuff all the way around. And, that wheel route look in particular is something they ran with Scott Matlock before. So now that you have a guy that, no offense to Scott Matlock, I think Matlock actually played really well in this game for what it's worth. And opened up one of Dobbins's bigger runs of the day. But, that's just not, you don't want Scott Matlock in that situation. You want someone a little bit smaller, someone a little bit more athletic with a little bit more wiggle, who can execute on that sort of play. So great to see that from Vidal. Hope that he gets some of these, RB2 reps going forward. I think in terms of just purely carries today, he had 4. Hassan Haskins had 2, although Haskins was more, as I understood it, kind of like short yardage situations. They liked him in that, I think it was 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, where they all kind of like, scrummed him like over the line and like the whole offensive line like pushed him forward. So, that's sort of where I think Haskins' utility kind of is versus Vidal. A little bit more active in both your standard run concepts and also like your RPO type deals, which, they got use out of today. So yeah, great debut from him. Excited for him as we all were on the podcast when he was drafted. Was my RB3 or day 3 running back guy the whole time. So to see him finally kind of get involved and show his skill set was great stuff. And I got to compliment the whole receiving group today, right? I think you have QJ kind of leave the game. He was gimpy, then he comes back. And the same thing happened with Ladd McConkey through the whole game, dealing with what looked like back injury. It looked like a combination of things that he was fighting through with some of the blows he was taking. So certainly, McConkey fought through it and ended up having some pretty important first down conversions. He goes four receptions for 43 yards. And so, yeah, he was really great today too. Not necessarily something surprising. And I do want to give a shout out to Simi Fehoko. Simi Fehoko was a guy who kind of grinded his way throughout the entire preseason, right? He was never guaranteed a roster spot. They specifically brought in Brendan Rice and Cornelius Johnson to, as that competition, right? That all these guys would have Jalen Gill, Leon Johnson, a lot of these guys for whoever was trying to kind of earn that last wide receiver spot. And, we'll see how things change when DJ Chark comes back and what the Chargers decide to do with the roster. But Simi Fehoko more than earned a spot to come back. He has that incredible catch over Riley Moss, who plays practically perfect coverage, but he's still able to find the ball and was a huge conversion on third down, which led to a field goal that they would get later in the drive. And that moment to extend the lead from 20 to 23 ends up, obviously being massive, because by the end of that game, it sort of puts the game out of reach for Denver unless they were to have converted that onside kick. So big moment there for Simi Fehoko, who led the team in receiving today. I think, given the circumstances of the game, if you told anyone about that before, they'd be like, what? Who? But great to see that from Fehoko, who balled out in the preseason and is showing he can hang in the regular season as well. So like seeing that. I like some of the tight end screen they did with Will Dissly, where they pulled some of the blockers. He got a bunch of yards after catch. I think he picked up like 20 yards, probably like 15 of which was just, some yards after the catch on a well-blocked play. So like seeing that from him, good involvement. Hayden Hurst, I think, played like the first half, and then he was in street clothes in the second half. So again, that's another injury situation to monitor. We'll see what happens with QJ and Ladd in terms of injury situations. This injury report that we're going to see probably on Thursday, because the Cardinals game is on Monday, going to be one of the more trickier injury reports that we've ever had to decipher on this here channel, or for Bolt Beat or on Twitter, any of the things that I do. In terms of trying to figure out who's going to be playing on Monday. We'll talk about Bosa in a bit, who, was on the injury report entering this game. But overall, I thought, the offense definitely petered out a little bit in the fourth quarter, particularly the run blocking wasn't there, and they kind of wanted to try to run to close out the game. They were able to bleed enough clock with that final sort of possession. They pick up a couple first downs and were able to get the Broncos at least out of timeouts. So that was good to see. And it was very nice to have Slater back in this game in particular. Steven has a graph from Next Gen Stats that showed that every time Dobbins ran outside to the left, he had eight runs for 51 yards. Dobbins had in total 25 carries today for 96. So any run that wasn't to that outside with Rashawn Slater was about 17 runs for about 45 yards, right? if you do the math there. But that 8 carries for 51 yards to that left side shows the efficiency and shows the importance of having all of these guys healthy. Of course, we'll see the update on Trey Pipkins. I think Jamari Salyer ended up finishing the game. There was a little bit of confusion about who was coming in and who was coming out. But big to have Rashawn Slater back, and you could tell the difference just having him and Joe Alt, on the left and right sides today versus, having whoever it is, Mustafa in the lineup and Jamari and Pipkins and the whole bit. This is, not that the offensive line looked perfect today. Certainly a lot of problems with it, but I think they give you a little bit of a borderline base of like what to expect with your offensive line, at least a minimal expectation versus, what we saw with the offensive line in the Chiefs game, which was certainly one of the offensive line performances of all time. That's about it that I had on offense. I would just add Herbert, obviously great game today. Anytime Vance Joseph showed him, kind of that blitz, I'm going to bring the house look on third down, I felt like he had the proper adjustment, got it out on time. And it reminded me a little bit of that game against the Vikings last year, even though he didn't throw for, 400 yards or something like that. It just felt like he was kind of dialed in at each moment that could have gone bad for the Chargers due to their, lack of offensive line, push, particularly in pass downs, or just Vance Joseph throwing the whole defense at him. He knew to get that thing out fast and ultimately converted a couple of first downs that I don't know if they would have converted otherwise. So that was great to see from Justin in general. And I think throughout the whole game, you could just kind of see the confidence that Greg Roman and Justin Herbert sort of had in one another, particularly Greg Roman in Justin Herbert's health. And that was a good thing to see because I think you could even see, and Greg Roman acknowledged this in his media availability this week, that performance against the Chiefs, the performance against the Steelers, right? They were very tied up with what they could do in those scenarios. And there were a bunch of looks that he just kind of dumped in a shotgun that he, wouldn't necessarily have before, but because he couldn't trust the offensive line, because he, couldn't trust Herbert's, mobility and then the ability to kind of defend himself, he took a lot of precautionary moves against getting Herbert more injured and stuff like that. So I definitely think that's kind of the, thing that I most liked about this game is you just saw Herbert dialing things up, getting things out quick, and ultimately, following the game plan. And it's his first 200-yard game of the season. Necessary celebration after some of the passing game performances we've seen up. So it was nice to see the Chargers open it up again today. Again, not perfect by any means, still things that can be improved. But it was nice to see the Herbert that we kind of all know is there when he's not injured, and that dynamic where Roman just sort of can trust him to sort of let it rip. Let's get to the defense. I think this was an interesting game, a little bit from the defense, definitely better in the first half than the second. I think in the second half in particular, you just saw that there was a point where they had so much attrition. Christian Fulton leaves the game. They were sort of banged up throughout the week in terms of the, corners that were practicing and playing. John's out for this game. ASJ is on IR. And Christian Fulton doesn't end up coming back as a result of the hamstring injury. So I think Harbaugh talked about after the press conference that Tarheeb Still and Cam Hart ended up getting lost in some routes in the way they were constructed. But, I think in the first half, they were generally playing pretty well in the secondary, kind of forced Bo Nix to, bail on some pockets just because of how good they were playing defensively downfield. So thought that was, again, tale of two halves thing, where you have a lot of guys that have not played significant football before. I thought this was a better game from Derwin. Obviously was suspended for the Chiefs game, but he was pretty solid, I thought, throughout. Weird Alohi Gilman game the last 2 weeks obviously takes the Xavier Worthy penalty, or Xavier Worthy play kind of against him because he lost sort of what his assignment on that play was supposed to be in terms of covering the field deep, and then takes that penalty, which sort of let the Broncos kind of back into the game by trying to bleed the clock against a Broncos player. He sort of just stood on top of him and took a really dumb penalty. So that wasn't great. Just a couple of defensive breakdowns throughout the rest of the game that just were like, you guys got to play smarter football than this. Some of it was obviously caused by the pass rush. And for as much as we talk about Joey Bosa as an often injured player, didn't play in this game, obviously, still kind of recovering from that hip. Hopefully he plays in the Arizona game. I was just pointing my calendar, but hopefully he's able to play in the Arizona game. He was a limited participant Friday this week, so that gives me a little bit of hope, going forward that they can get him back. But back to the original point, Bud Dupree misses on some sacks, and I just think you could feel by the end of that game that Mac, Tooley, Bud all gassed. And when you have 3 edge rushers, that's kind of the problem. And as far as I know, Justin Herbert, who's been training, kind of as an edge rusher, did not play in this game. So they rode those 3 guys essentially the entire way of the game and did not, let up, under any circumstances. And that's tougher to do in Denver with the altitude. So, I think by the end of that game, combination of the secondary injuries and everything that came apart there, as well as the kind of pass rush that was anemic, Morgan Fox barely came off of the field at all, too. It felt like him and Mac and all those guys, essentially what they've been tested with in terms of the defensive line injuries, it caught up to them today. Particularly from a Joey Bosa perspective. So I hope that Bosa is able to come back, as much as, like I mentioned, he's kind of maligned by the fan base and a lot of us, I think, in general for missing games. I was comfortable with moving on from him this past offseason, frankly, with where he was in his career. When he does play, he is a different player. And you even saw, even if it's at a 50% capacity against Carolina, he's still capable of affecting the game and also making it so you don't have to kind of overuse Bud Dupree and overuse Tooley and kind of overexert them. So Joey Bosa playing, I think, would be a big help for this defense. I thought the linebackers generally played pretty well today between Dion and Denzel Perryman. Denzel Perryman obviously coming up with a huge stop on Marvin Mims, which kept the game 2 possessions instead of 1 possession on that 2-point conversion. Shout out to him. That was nice to see. One coaching decision I did want to talk about and focus in on. So we talked about Harbaugh burning the timeout, I think, last week, as well as, his challenges and stuff like that. There was a moment, I want to make sure I get this correct, where I think in the 4th quarter, Harbaugh had a chance to ultimately extend the lead in a situation where he ends up punting. So this was, let's see exactly. Yeah, this was with, I think, yeah, sorry, this is the best television. But they essentially could have had what would have been a 58-ish yard Cameron Dicker kick. They end up punting on that drive back to Denver. It would have extended the lead from 10 to 13. They opt not to do that. Obviously, Mile High, again, not the most optimal place to kick, but I thought that was an interesting call by Harbaugh. I kind of agreed with punting it, given the field position they saved to. Then J.K. Scott downs a punt inside the 5-yard line and makes Denver burn clock. by driving down the field, as opposed to if Dicker misses that kick, that is Denver starting at near midfield. And then, they potentially have more time to play around at the end there rather than being forced into doing the onside kick. So I thought that was actually a pretty good game management decision, all things considered, by Jim Harbaugh. I'd be curious to see kind of what the analytics said about that situation and everything. But yeah, ultimately, a pretty, I thought, well-coached game by everybody involved. Obviously, I think there's some things to fix on offense in terms of the second half issues. We've talked about the Chargers coming out hot for a while, but I think the first step of having this pass game look a little bit more cohesive is a start. It certainly does not look perfect by any means with Greg Roman yet, but I think there is certainly a path now with Slater and Alt healthy on the outside, as well as Herbert now being healthy, to getting more consistent offense through four quarters. Obviously, they kind of have to hold up offensively and defensively injury-wise to be able to do that. But I did think there were some positive steps taken in the right direction today from an offensive standpoint. So good things to see all around in this game. Like I mentioned, on offense, loved what I saw from Herbert. He, was sensational today, even if the, gaudy numbers aren't there. And it's not like he, had a Caleb Williams statistical game from that Jaguars, game in London. But that being said, even without the big numbers to show, doesn't turn the ball over, doesn't take, ridiculously, bad sacks. He ends up throwing for his first 200-yard game of the season and, did well on 21 to 34. So I think just in terms of what we expect from Herbert, this was much more in tune with what healthy Herbert does. So it was great to see that from him. The Vidal touchdown, Pryor's confirmed, was great. J.K. Dobbins, as I mentioned, a good running game from him, and nice to have Slater back in that regard to get, this rushing offense a little bit off the ground. Even though it wasn't perfect in totality. I think they only ended up averaging 3.4 yards per carry, but they got the big runs sort of when they needed them. And shout out to the receiving core. Like I said earlier, sort of a every man helps out type situation. I think they had, like 4 players get around 40 yards, and, then you had Disley and QJ and everybody sort of chip in. And so that was nice to see from everyone. I think Herbert targeted, let's see, it looks like 9 different receivers today. I think that might be his highest of the season. But overall, nice to see that from the team in general. Sort of a supplementary game where they needed it, where one guy was not going to explode on this Denver defense, certainly. So nice to see that from them, as I said. Great bits and moments from Khalil Mack in this game prior to kind of how the second half went. Taylor Tart picking up a fumble, which was nice. And good performance from the linebackers, I would say, on defense. And I think there were some pivotal moments in this game where the defense, even though they didn't play well in the entire second half, I think there were some struggles there for sure. You could talk about the defensive line and Bud Dupree for sure, but they played well when they needed to. Shout out to Poona Ford in that category as well, who really kept a lot of Denver's run game sort of in check outside of the Bo Nix stuff, which wasn't necessarily in his control. That was in other defenders' control. But yeah, in terms of the Broncos run game, they had, in terms of non-Bo Nix yards, I think they only ended up having 49 rush yards outside of Bo Nix. So good to see that. And, the Bo Nix stuff in general was just like, you have to end the game and take the chance to end the game before it gets to a situation like it did in the fourth quarter. And like I said, if Dupree comes up with some of those sacks, then we're not talking about a lot of the stuff we're talking about in terms of the end game meltdown. I do think a lot of that is just kind of exhaustion and not finishing up plays with health in the defense is right now, particularly in that Denver environment. But got to come up with plays when you can come up with them. That's just kind of the facts. But yeah, that'll do it for this episode of Bolt Breakdowns. Thought it was a great win to get the monkey off of our back in this Denver scenario. Crazy how we ended up getting there through Jim Harbaugh heart complications and Simi Fehoko third down conversions, and you take the long and winding road instead of the straight path, which is the most normal Chargers game of all time. But maybe the Chargers should try to play less stressful offensive and defensive games for their head coach now going forward, given everything that we know. But that'll do it for this episode of Bolt Breakdowns. I will see you guys next after the Cardinals game on Tuesday, because the Chargers play Monday Night Football this week. So I will see you guys next week. As always, bolt up and fuck the donkeys. Am I right?